certifying badasses, one podcast at a time, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Fearless Fridays are filled with the best tips, advice, and direction, like tasty apple-a-day tidbits that grow intuition from your supply of common sense, under the watchful guidance of Kelly Orchard, Badass Certifier. Flipping the format on the fear of failure.
All right, that's right. Thank you, Bobby Ocean. It is Fruitful Friday, once again, March 12th. I'm Kelly Orchard, the Badass Certifier. This is the podcast for successful badassery. And if you like my little unwitting sidekick over here, his name is Bobby Ocean, and he's an old family friend, and I just love that he's playing along with me. And this is Fruitful Friday. You know, for the entire month of March, I'm having a little bit of a badass leadership summit. That's right. The theme is leadership. And you know, badass is an acronym. So on Wednesday, I deal with what the acronym is. And the D in badass is to decide. And this month, I'm also playing you some clips of some of the songs that I've put onto my badass soundtrack attached to the story that I tell. Now, you can do this fast track. You can join my badass certification class, or sign up for my badass license to be badass program, or you can just stay in the slow lane here and continue to listen to the podcast. Either way, my goal is to help you hop on the bus to Badassville as I certify badasses one podcast at a time. Now, today is Fruitful Friday. I've got some leadership apples for you, some apples of wisdom, and some weekend vibes. You know, on Wednesday It's Still Rock and Roll to Me from Billy Joel, and Bobby's going to kind of try to choose what song we're going to do on the next Wednesday. So let's go. What do you think, Bobby? What song do you think we should look into for next Wednesday? But meanwhile, we've got some Fruitful Friday apples of wisdom for you. Do you know what these apples are all about?
Just as apples are a core ingredient to a healthy diet, Kelly Orchard's Apple a Day is a core ingredient to living a fruitfully badass life.
I love that. The way it all ended and everything, and you can live a fruitfully badass life. It is true, though. The Apple a Day is a core ingredient of the License to be Badass program. So, hey, what season are you in? You are in a season, whichever one it is, spring, summer, fall, or winter. And the one thing that you can count on, it's going to change. When we talk about our seasons of life, we often consider our youth is its springtime. Our 20s and 30s are probably the summer of our life. You know, our 50s and 60s, and that's the fall. In our later years, we look at the winter of our life. Okay. That's a good analogy. I'd like to say that we go through many seasons of our lives. So you may have many springtimes, a time to reinvent, a time to start over, a time to plant new seeds for growth. You have many summers of your life, a time to grow naturally, time to focus on your strengths, time to take action or just relax. And then you have many times where it's the fall of your life, where you're counting your blessings and reaping the fruits of all your hard work. And you'll have many times where it's a winter season, when we have to cut back the old and withered parts of our life, cut them off and start to prune back some of our expectations so that we're ready to start again. Change is inevitable. Whatever season you're in right now, it will change. Be patient with yourself. Self-growth is tender. It's holy ground. There's no greater investment. That's a quote from Stephen Covey. So you've got to take advantage of every experience. Take advantage of everything your season has to offer. If you're in a season of struggling, then take advantage of the opportunity to listen to your own desires and listen to others who might be struggling also. Find comfort that you are not alone. Take time to learn and observe what is happening all around you, at work, at home, in your relationships. Take time for growth. Now, if you're in a season of happiness and contentment, make sure that you show yourself the appreciation and about the happiness and the contentment. Be grateful. Be generous, especially to the person who's in a season of struggling, because you never know when you're going to be there too. Seasons change. Our life changes. It's the one thing we can count on. Remember the words of Steve Jobs. Your time is limited. Don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living the result of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of other people's opinions drown out your inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary.
Kelly Orchard's Apple a Day. Good medicine for a badass. How do you like them apples?
Well, Bobby, you gotta not take yourself too seriously. You gotta have a sense of humor, which is, why I ask you to join me here.
A Kelly Orchard apple a day keeps a badass in sway.
Well, okay, so being a woman in the business world requires a delicate balance like that of an Olympic gymnast. Women are extremely concerned about their appearance, their home life, their husband's ego if they're married, kids' perceptions, along with navigating her way through the business community. In Victorville, I learned that being tough yet feminine, so you wouldn't come off as, requires a finesse that can only be learned. Many times I tripped too far on one side of the feminine scale and came off too vulnerable and weak and was taken advantage of. Many times I tipped too far on the other side of the harsh business side of the scale and came off as being a stone cold you-know-what. I'm not kidding. The marketing, promotions, and public relations segment of small market radio is where I had the most fun. For many years, I had the privilege of participating in numerous charitable events, concerts, parades, local sporting events, live broadcasts, leadership conferences, festivals, and fairs. You name it. I had a great experience as part of a planning committee, from the start to completion, and I was happy to be a resource for the organization that I was connected to. I volunteered my own time, my radio time, and established good working relationships with business owners, managers, directors, CEOs, public officials, and the general public. But it wasn't always perfect. Lots of mistakes were made along the way. I tend to have a sassy personality, which as a radio personality was completely appropriate, but not always in the boardroom. I still find myself having to walk that very thin line of holding my sassiness in a meeting, and not. It often depends on whether the person sitting across the table from me takes themselves too seriously or not. I've learned as I've gained years of experience that I can't change my personality, but I can control whom I let it loose for. That's right. After about 10 or 12 years in the radio business and the Victorville business community, I knew my way around and was no longer a rookie by any sense of the definition. I was in charge of all of our station promotions and the events that we became involved in. Since this was a family business, I also had some say over what happened with our sales and advertising department. The community had a minor league baseball team, and our station had been a big supporter of the team and its organization from the very beginning. Our AM station was contracted to carry their games, as we already carried the Los Angeles Dodgers and were the official sports team or sports station in Victorville. After a few years, a new general manager was hired on for the team, and when one of our account executives paid him a visit to talk about advertising and promoting the games and how we could work together, this new and very young manager laughed at him and stated, "We're the only thing in town. We don't need the local media." Uh-oh. That didn't sit well with my sales rep, who was a huge fan and booster of the team. It didn't sit well with me either. We were no longer carrying the games for the team, but for years we'd partnered in hundreds of promotions with this team, and it had always been a great relationship. Now this new guy comes into this small town and displays an attitude of disdain for the local media and businesses. Do you think he took himself too seriously? Do you think that I took it too seriously? Actually, I maintained a sense of humor about it throughout the entire baseball season. I had nothing to lose by making the decision that I made. We wrote a letter of response to the manager and explained to him the former relationship between the radio station and the team and let him know that we appreciate his position. However, since he didn't need us to promote his team or his games or let our audience know what the score of last night's game was or who they were playing tomorrow, then we won't do it. The season was more than halfway over when the manager began making his public relations apology tour to all the media outlets in town. He figured out that he actually did need media coverage and humbled himself to bring ballpark food to the station to serve us lunch. We obliged his request and accepted his apology, but the relationship was tarnished, and we all knew it. I don't recall what the other stations or news outlets did for the team, but I do know that this particular baseball season, our radio station never mentioned the team. Not in any of our sports reports, news reports, community calendar of events, or anything at all. We used to have players come in and be on the morning show, but there was no such visits this season. Who took themselves too seriously in this scenario? I'm sure it wasn't entirely my decision. I'm sure that my dad and other staff were all on board. But for this particular decision, because of my current role as promotions and marketing director, I was the face of the decision to completely black out any publicity for this minor league team. We didn't put an end to the team, and I don't think the manager lasted beyond the one season and a new manager was hired. I don't even remember his name, and I wonder if he remembers mine. After all, this was one of those occasions where I had to make a harsh decision to show strength in business, but from my perspective, I kept a sense of humor about it. It's a fine line, man or woman, and it's so important not to take yourself so seriously. Whatever difficult decisions need to be made in your career, home life, relationship, look at it as an opportunity to learn and grow.
Flipping the format on the fear of failure. Don't be asked backwards, be badass.
Well, Bobby, I'm glad that you enjoyed the story about the baseball team. Leadership in life needs a badass foundation. In order to grow, everything needs a solid foundation. Everything in life needs a foundation. When you're putting together or building a home, you need solid foundation, which is concrete slab. The solid foundation for the structure. When you're putting on your clothes for your day, you need a solid foundation, which might be your shoes or the dress or the suit that you're going to wear. And then that you'll accessorize by adding jewelry. When you go for a college education, you'll have a solid foundation in a field of study for a specific degree. When you're planting a garden, you need a solid foundation. The solid foundation in a garden or an orchard or anything that grows from the ground is the soil. So in your personal or professional growth, you need a solid foundation. So your solid foundation is your soul. What's in your soul? What do you believe in, stand for, are accountable to? How do you talk and think about yourself? How do you identify your solid, badass foundation? I want you to nibble on that a little bit. From the womb, our purpose is growth. We're always running around asking, what is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of this or that? When an egg is fertilized and starts to grow in its mother's womb, any species or animal, it has one purpose and one purpose only: to grow. Just imagine if an embryo started to question its existence from the womb. What is my purpose? It doesn't. It just does naturally what it's designed to do: grow. Just like a seed that is planted in the ground. When properly nurtured, nourished, and cared for, it grows. Your purpose is growth. It is constant and perpetual. And when it comes down to being a badass leader, you must be perpetually seeking personal growth. A small plant is not expected, nor is it able to bear fruit. It cannot bear the weight, but would fall over and die. There is a specific time in nature when fruit is ready. Matthew 21:34. If received prematurely, it would destroy what has not weathered the test of time and been strengthened by the growth process. 1 Timothy 3:6. Growth is biblical. Growth is ancient. Growth is your purpose. There are no shortcuts in God. Maturity comes with growth, and growth takes time. So those are some leadership apples of wisdom for you on this Fruitful Friday. Hey, you can get your daily nourishment of wisdom, success, and personal growth by subscribing to Kelly Orchard's Apple a Day on the same platform that you're listening to this podcast. Also, here's some weekend vibes. Okay, so, Wednesday I played from my Badass soundtrack, It's Still Rock and Roll to Me. Music, it's springtime. It always sets in motion some new growth, fresh ideas, new attitudes. That's what It's Still Rock and Roll reminds me of, is a new beginning. So this weekend, do some music discovery as you contemplate new beginnings and fresh ideas. And when you find that perfect song that represents what you're feeling about something new that's coming up, make sure you add it to your Badass soundtrack, all right? All right. So, hey, listen, this is what we learned on today's podcast. All right, so this week, this month, we're covering the letter D in Badass and the Badass acronym. That means to decide. People often ask what's the hardest part about becoming licensed to be badass, and it is making the decision that you want to make a shift. So during this Badass Leadership Summit throughout the month of March, I'm focusing on the apples of leadership. So today we had some apples of wisdom with leadership practices. We did It's Still Only Rock and Roll to Me with Billy Joel on Wednesday. Remember, I'm only playing a 30-second clip of the song, and it is for educational purposes only. I'm not trying to claim anything, so I don't want to get any kind of copyright rules, so don't tell anybody. Okay, but next Wednesday, I'll have another story to tell you and another song clip. So Bobby, what do you think my next song should be?
Carry on, wayward daughter.
Wait, what? Is that a hint?
That's right, Kelly. What's on your badass soundtrack? Flipping the format on the fear of failure.
Thanks for listening and getting one step closer to being licensed to be badass. Be sure to subscribe to continue on the bus to Badassville. Snag your Badass Habits ebook at licensedtobebadass.com. You can stay in the slow lane and get just enough tools for successful badassery, one podcast at a time. Or you can join the Badass Ambassador crew in the fast lane by checking your baggage with my Licensed to be Badass integrated program with videos, worksheets, and group coaching for motivation, mindset, and a fresh approach to living a fruitfully badass life.